All right, big man, welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. It is Tuesday, October 4th. It's Eddie, it's Chief. Chief, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
All right.
Ish. Well-ish.
You're hurting, you're limping?
Yeah, a little
Just
bit.
had a, off the heels of a nice snake draft.
Yeah, that's why I'm tired. I just, I didn't realize the fireball that Kelly in Vegas is. Like, she could power this whole office.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she's got that much energy. She could power a small Kansas town.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I feel like I just went in 12 rounds with Tyson after going a snake draft with her and White Sox Dave.
It was like a three-way fight where you're just getting hit, like dodging punches from both of them all the time. It was something else.
It was something. But in the vein of that, we're actually going to stay in Las Vegas. I mean, it's such a fucking interesting place.
It really is, and it's a place that it's still new, and it's a place that shouldn't exist. Like, there's no, like, if you look at the history of cities across the world, they're all built on like a waterway, or a lake, a river, something, like all of them. Like, think of a city that is in the middle of the desert besides Las Vegas. It just doesn't exist. Even cities that, like, if you think of, like, Denver, kind of like would be the closest thing, I guess, where it was like, hey, like, this is like the last stop before you have to go into the mountains. And if you're going to be a miner, it's like, let's just keep this outside of that. And then, like, trains really allowed that to be built. Vegas was just like, let's just put a city there.
Yeah.
And it was really one guy. Who really, like, spearheaded the Vegas that we know today. And that story it was a story that I knew just from, or a snippet of it, just from watching The Godfather. And I believe this is Godfather Part 2. The character is Mo Green. And the other character, and there's been a new movie that's been out maybe the last 5 years called Meyer Lansky. And Meyer Lansky was, he was Hyman Roth in Godfather 2. So the guy who's trying to put the whole Cuba deal together. And Bugsy Siegel was like his best friend from when they were growing up. And he was Mo Green, depicted in The Godfather, who got shot in the eye when Michael Corleone was, like, consolidating power. And it was in Godfather 2, there's like this kind of a powerful scene, powerful moment where they're asking, like, hey, like, who killed Frank Pantangeli? And the Hyman Roth character goes, he starts telling the story about, like, as an answer to that question, goes, he's talking about Mo Green. He goes, later on, he had an idea to build a city out of a desert stopover for GIs on their way to the West Coast. That kid's name was Mo Green, and that city he invented was Las Vegas. This was a great man. And there isn't even a plaque or a statue or a signpost of him in that town. This was like a man of vision and guts. Like, he was, like, portraying him as this great guy. And then and then Corleone had him gunned down, and Hyman Roth never asked any questions. And that's not the full story of what happened to him, but we'll kind of get into that because it's like fact and fiction kind of blended to one. But Hyman Roth is based on Meyer Lansky, who was known as the mob's accountant. And then Bugsy Siegel was like his running mate.
So and this is the tale of the real life Mo Green, the guy who founded Las Vegas, basically.
Correct.
Before we really get into it, I mean, like, there's a large contingent of Chicago people in Las Vegas.
I think that is something that I always, when I was growing up, my family was largely from Florida. I didn't realize how many people from Chicago go to Arizona and to Las Vegas. It's significant.
It's like New York is like the Florida thing, and then Chicago's like the Vegas and Arizona type thing.
Exactly.
So I know a lot of you guys are missing your Italian beef, and you've come to the right place. Hopefully you're tuning in. I'd love to see. It would make me very happy if we had a nice uptick in Nevada sales after this week.
And you've seen it with some of these other kind of Chicago brand, like Lou Malnati's is out in Arizona now. You don't need the store. You just need to go to tasterealchicago.com or go to the Barstool Sports store, get that beef kit. It is perfect year round, but there is something about that smell roasting in the crock pot, the slow cooker all day with the spices, and you're getting that together for your nice, like, Sunday meal at night. I can't wait. You know what I know? I was talking to my mom the other day. They're over in they've been in Europe for like a month. Nice to be, like, kind of semi-retired, I guess.
Yeah.
And they're talking about they want to just start having Sunday dinners. So like they're just going to host them every Sunday, and whoever wants to come can come. And I'm going to try to make it out to St. Charles for a lot of those. I'm bringing beef kits because that is like a communal. It's easy. It's delicious. Yep. Everybody loves it. You got to get on the beef kit.
Yep. Go do it. TasteRealChicago.com. All of the people who have the snowbirds, everyone who's moved to the West Coast, grab yourself a beef kit, TasteRealChicago.com. Or if you're just here and you want to make it for yourself, it's football season. You're probably walking outside, seeing some desert, seeing some sand, but have that smell of home with TasteRealChicago.com. Go check that out. And as always, visit the store at 901 West Randolph and get yourself a sub.
Yep, it's the best. JP Grazianos. They named the street after him for a reason.
Yeah, get a catering tray.
Yeah.
Get a catering tray.
That's a nice move for a family party, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's another thing, Friendsgiving's around the corner, too.
Oh, yeah.
You want to get those orders in beforehand. That's a great thing to show up to any kind of party with. This is like the get-together season, I feel like. Tailgates, holidays. JP Graziano has you for everything.
Yep, they certainly do.
Yep.
All right, the real life Mo Green.
Yeah, so the real life Mo Green, and there was that quote from Hyman Roth in The Godfather where he's lamenting that there's not even a plaque or a statue or anything like that of Bugsy Siegel in Las Vegas. Wrong, there is. Okay, so the casino hotel venue that he really founded was the Flamingo. Flamingo has a giant plaque of this guy. And rightfully so. And it's this beautiful thing that's in the Flamingo, and that was like the first real luxury hotel casino in Vegas, and that gave birth to like the Vegas that we know today with, the Bellagio, the Venetian, the Aria, all those places. They were conceptualized by Bugsy Siegel in the 1940s, and he's like a fascinating kind of character as this immigrant story. He was born in Brooklyn to he's a Jewish guy. He's one of the founders of the so-called like Jewish mafia, him and Meyer Lansky, and he's in Brooklyn. And speaking of another mob movie, Goodfellas, where you have who's the main actor in that? He just passed away.
Yeah, Ray Liotta.
Ray Liotta, and he has that opening monologue. It was like, the only thing I ever wanted to be was a gangster, and that was Bugsy Siegel. So he was looking around, and his parents weren't mob people. But he's looking around his neighborhood, and he's like, the fastest way to get out of here is to be a bad guy. I'm going to be a bad guy. By the time he was 14, he was running shit. He had his own gang, and that's like another, just to give you people a vision, in Godfather 2 when you have De Niro, and he's the young Vito Corleone, and he's like working at a grocery store, and everybody's got these different carts in the streets in Brooklyn, kind of like our guy JP Graziano. That's how he got started too, with like a cart in the street selling stuff. And so Siegel and his gang would go to these different street cart guys and be like, hey, like, you need my protection. And like, hey, buzz off, kid. Like, we don't need your protection. Like, he goes, you do, or you're gonna, I swear it's gonna be trouble for you if you don't pay us for protection. He's extorting people. And they're like, we got it. Okay. So then he would douse their cart in kerosene, be like, you need our protection. You better start paying us, every week. And the people who were told him to fuck off, he'd light a match and burn their cart right in front of them, or come back and burn it. And then the other people would just pay him. So he was, from the time that he was 14, he was doing extortion and running a gang. And then he was doing like dice games and gambling all the way up until he was 18. He was a gangster from like basically since he was in diapers.
What a menace. You hear like KFC tell that story too about, well, not a story, but he always talks about how like high school kids in New York are like the scariest people, or anywhere really.
Yeah.
When you see them, you just kind of avoid them because they're such wild cards.
You never know.
This guy was actually
genuine.
A fucking force.
Yeah. He's and like a guy who was not afraid of the muscle, doing that, like the dirty side of things. And that was kind of why Meyer Lansky and he were like this really great team. Meyer Lansky was known as the brains. So and we'll get into it, but he became, they called him the accountant for like all the heads of the New York family. So he was not like, they had the commission, with Luciano and all the Genovese and all these powerful families. And then he didn't have like a board seat at the council, but he was the guy who was like running all their projects. So he was like, he knew the money, knew the ins and outs, had good relationships with all of them. And so they were both kind of Brooklyn kids. They met, they formed like a tight bond at a dice game where somebody was caught cheating or thought Lansky was cheating, and I think Siegel came in and knocked the guy off of Lansky, and from that moment on, the two of them were like, tight, and they formed this partnership, and this is like the golden age of the mafia, right? So this is the 20s, this is Prohibition, and where you can just kind of get away with just about anything. And Lansky and Siegel they started in Brooklyn. They had like the Lower West Side of New York, and they were doing very well, but they were also very careful because it was like a very contentious time where you could make a lot of money being a gangster, and it was a golden age, but it was very competitive. So you had all these families who were at war with each other all the time. Within the Italians, you had the Jewish guys, which was became largely them, and then you had the Irish mob. You had some of these other kind of like almost like gangs in New York. I know you haven't seen it, but like the natives, like they had their own gangs. They had all these people. They're always kind of fighting for the same sort of turf, same sort of industry in New York City and all cities. And it got to the point where they had this big meeting, and they kind of talk about this a little. They show one of these things in The Godfather as well. They had basically like a conference. It's like, hey, like white flag, everybody come in. Everybody goes to Atlantic City. So like Capone was there, Lansky was there, Genovese was there, Buffalo was there, like all of the big names, people from Chicago, Detroit, New York, Buffalo, New York, all of these different people that had Kansas City that had like an established mafia presence came to this meeting in 1929 in Atlantic City because there was so much violence at that time. And Lansky was like a guy who was, and Siegel was there too, but they're instrumental in being like, hey, like we have to come up with a solution because all this violence is really bad for business. So back in the old country of Italy, really you had like this system where you had a king boss, okay? So you had all these other families, okay, and they were doing different things, but everything eventually kicked up to one guy. The boss of bosses is what they would call him. And there were two guys competing for this in New York City. And that's where this war was like, who are you aligned with? There's these two older guys. So everybody gets together in New York. And it was Lansky and Siegel were like, you know what we really need to do? Because these guys will never give up the fight to be the boss of bosses. We just have to kill them. So both of those two, who were the top two guys, they get whacked out by their own lieutenants. Genovese was one of the ones. Siegel was like, there was a 4-man hit team on one of the top guys. And then it was like, all right, everybody just calm down. Okay, so it's like you split things up, you have relative peace because they had been at war for like 10 years. And it's like, let's just knock out these top guys and we'll split everything equally kind of amongst each other. We'll draw lines and things that we can all agree on. And we'll all just kind of do our own thing. And Lansky and Siegel were a part of that. And then it started getting ratcheted up again where it's becoming violent. And it's like, well, whose side are you really on? And that's when Lansky and Siegel were like, you know what? You know what's better than this? Los Angeles. Let's get the fuck out of here. So Lansky stayed behind because he was a little bit tighter, but he sent Siegel out to L.A., and basically Siegel kind of invented the mob in L.A. So everything that he was doing and what was going on in the kind of the bigger cities, L.A. was still new. You know, like this was a place where like Hollywood was there. That must have been like the best place. That might be the single best place to live at the best time would be like 1940s L.A. The weather's unbelievable. They have like, all the parties, the starlets, all that kind of stuff, but it's not crowded. And it's not like everything's going to be new because you're building it new. In my brain, that might have been like the best time to be anywhere in the world. Would be LA at the end of the 30s.
It's a good argument.
Yeah. And they like the Depression didn't really hit LA as much because it was still like booming and it had kind of Depression proof industries, like it's film, right? So it's not like if you're a star, you're a star. Mm-hmm. And you didn't have the homelessness population. It was just like new and clean and beautiful and not just like 5 hours of traffic everywhere you go. So like that must have been just like a golden era time.
Hey, let's take a quick break here because we got to talk about our friends at Game Time, the exclusive ticketing partner of Barstool Sports. Created by fans for fans, Game Time is a new ticketing app that makes it easier than ever. They score last-minute deals on tickets to sports, concerts, and shows, and they guarantee the lowest price. If you haven't given Game Time a shot yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. You guys are going to love this app. We've had tons of Barstool fans using it. They're hitting us up on social and telling us about the great deals they are getting. It's football season.
So it's about to be everything season.
Yep.
There's that one special month of October where you have MLB baseball playoffs, so depending on where you're listening, not Chicago, but you might have a team, Yankees, Mets, whoever, go see your team in the playoffs. You use Game Time. You got football. You got college football. NHL starts. Blackhawks actually had a pretty decent home crowd for preseason game number 1, but you'll be able to get tickets to see Patrick Kane's swan song here. So you should do that, and on the Bulls. So Game Time is the place for last minute tickets. Like you always said, they have great deals. The hidden fees, just like it's not the same as these other ones where it's like, well, the fees just doubled my fucking price.
Yep.
So Game Time's the best. So easy to use. Goes right into your iPhone wallet. It's awesome.
So download the Game Time app, go to the account tab to create a login and redeem code DOGWALK for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's get back into the episode.
And so he went out there and he's like, I'm going to, and he became like the toast of LA. Bugsy Siegel did. He was like the guy. So he's running with, all the biggest stars, all the biggest musicians. He's doing prostitution. He's doing drugs. He's doing gambling. He's doing all these things. So like that's what he's known. That's what he's been doing. And the Hollywood types are like, yeah, this guy's like, he's cool. Like, like there's something just cool about a cool mafia guy. And then all the big studio heads were Jewish people too. And so he was just like he was like a made man in LA, even though they all knew what he was up to, but he was like the cool bad boy of LA. And so as time goes on, he gets involved. Nevada legalizes casinos, and then they had legalized horse racing. So he was involved in some business dealings there. So he was going out there. But at that time, like Las Vegas as a town name didn't even really exist. Okay, it was just called Highway 91. So that's like how little was there. Wow. It was Highway 91, and they did have some like casinos. And so they built the Hoover Dam, and I think that was like a Depression era, like a New Deal construction thing. They were building the Hoover Dam to basically power LA because they had energy needs, and they built this Hoover Dam. So everybody that was going to Las Vegas, that Highway 91 to as a source of entertainment, they were construction guys who were working on the Hoover Dam. And then they had a lot of military personnel during World War II and the lead up to World War II, who there were bases nearby. So it's like you have a weekend leave or you have a weekend off from working on the Hoover Dam. Well, the only thing within 4 hours of here is these like a few scattered casinos, which were all run by the Mormons. But they were like dude ranch. They were not like glitzy or glamorous or just, it'd be like going to a casino in like kind of middle America. It's just not like the same experience as going to Vegas that it is today. So Siegel gets out there and he's like, I got all these LA friends. There's a highway that goes right here. It's pretty close. I want to create a glamorous resort that has everything. And it's going to have the entertainment. We're going to have golf. We're going to have you're not going to be able to come in here in your work outfit or your army uniform. Okay. It's going to be like you're dressed up. Like we have a dress code here. And so he goes back to Lansky, pitches him this idea. Lansky loves it. Lansky pitches it to the other mob bosses. They're all on board, all the New York families, some of the Chicago families. And so they raise money. And Siegel had the estimated cost to open the first resort casino gambling haven of this kind, which is going to be called the Flamingo. He's like, maybe $1.5 million. No problem. Okay. Well, it wasn't $1.5 million. It ended up being like $6 million. So the people are like, what the fuck? Okay. All the mob bosses back home are like, what the fuck? Like we keep putting money in this thing. He hasn't even opened it yet. So then he finally goes to they're pressuring him to open it. You better fucking open this thing and start making some money. So he opens it and he has this all planned out, and he's going to have all his LA friends come. So it's going to be in the papers. It's going to be this, this big thing. And they have like a freak rainstorm come through. So nobody, cause like the highways are not what they were. and nobody can even, all those people are like, we can't even really get to this big opening. So it kind of opens and flops, and they lose $300,000 in the first weekend because they buy all the food, they buy all this, so they can't sell anything, and then nobody's there. And they opened up the casino and the entertainment venue before the hotel was done. So everybody that had come out from LA were like, we can't even fucking stay here. So then they would go to other hotel casinos, like the little dingier ones, and like really kind of spend their money there. So they're losing money. So like Siegel's like, they were scrambling. He ends up closing it and reopening it in 2 months. But now like the damage is done. So now you go back, and it's another thing from The Godfather, but the timeline's different. They're having this big kind of mafia convention, but this time they have it in Havana, Cuba. And the reason they have it in Havana, Cuba is because Lucky Luciano had been deported. So he can't come to the United States. So everybody goes down to Havana. They're trying to basically build a Las Vegas in Havana as well. And they have this conference, and they like, one of the main topics of all the mafia bosses at this conference was like the quote unquote Siegel situation, because he had this girlfriend who was making frequent trips to Switzerland. They were accusing him of skimming off the top, like skimming, like, hey, like that. Let's say, like, hey, I need like X amount of granite or X amount of tables. It costs this, and then he would give him, they would quote him a price, and he would like, yeah, well, it's actually 80,000. I'm going to put 20,000. If it's 100,000, I'm going to put 20 in my pocket. So they thought he was like stealing from them. They had already put in $6 million, or weren't getting any return. They had to shut down the casino. And Lansky's like, just give him a chance. Just give him a chance. He's almost ready. He's almost ready. And it got to the point where the bosses were just like, dude, we know he's your guy, but we're out. No more. So he's in his Beverly Hills mansion with his girlfriend. Guys break in, shoot him 4 times, dead. The Flamingo had been reopened. It reopened in March of 1947. He was shot in June of 47. And then within 20 minutes of his shooting in LA, 3 mafia guys show up at the Flamingo and like, we're in charge now. Okay, like we're taking over.
We're the captain now.
Yeah, exactly. We're the captain. Like, where's Bugsy? Don't worry about Bugsy. Don't worry about him. We're in charge here. We're taking over. And they did. So then from that, they made a fuck ton of money. Okay, they made a fuck ton of money. And that, the other little detail about where the Flamingo, it was in a section of Las Vegas, like that area, where they're outside the jurisdiction of the Mormon people, who were like the councilmen and all these people who were like really giving Bugsy Siegel a hard time when he was initially going out there, because like, we don't like this mob guy, we don't like this Jewish guy connected to Italian immigrant mob. Like, it's like very racial prejudice, and like just anti-mob as well. And they had the market cornered on their own thing, so they were giving a hard time. So he put the Flamingo kind of just outside their jurisdiction. And then once Siegel was out of the way, they started making like so much money that they did all these other casinos, these luxury places, and built the infrastructure. And, by the time the 60s roll around, it's like a paradise, because they're using it to launder their money from their other dealings. And then we've talked about Jimmy Hoffa before, right? So the FBI was kind of like, we know you guys are laundering money. Like, you're taking in money from drugs and racketeering and prostitution in New York and all these other places, and then putting it into like this other fund to go build a casino. You wash it, and then you send the casino money back, and it's clean. So like the government was like, got wise to it. So then that's when they bring in Jimmy Hoffa, because Jimmy Hoffa was in charge of the Teamsters and running like these pension funds. So he would take the pension fund, invest it in a casino, which was owned by the mafia. So it's like everybody's winning. So we'll take the clean money from the blue collar pension fund, put it into the casino, get the casino built, send the money back to the mafia bosses. So like they're getting money hand over fist. And it wasn't until the movie Casino, they actually had like a written truce, not a written truce, a spoken truce, but like no mob violence in Las Vegas. That's bad for business. We don't want anybody thinking that they're going to get robbed, shot, anything when you're in Vegas. So there was none of that allowed. There was like an agreement between all the mafia families that had investments and dealings in Vegas. And then Spilatro, who was Nicky Santorum in Casino, came out, and similar to Siegel, he went out there and basically got out of line with how he was spending money, how he was running his operation. And the bosses let it go on for a while because he had connections and he was like he was like a guy. But it's like, you know what, man, you've been fucking up for too long. You cross the threshold, you're dead. And so it's like a tale as old as time with the mafia, where it's like if you act right within their own code of ethics, you can do very well. But if you step out of line, no one's too big to get whacked, and including Bugsy Siegel, who invented Las Vegas, including Spilatro, Anthony Spilatro, who really like became, that was in like the golden era, and he's like, this guy is fucking up our golden era. He's getting like, because he like had things written down, his wires were tabbed, because now we're into the 80s. And then the other thing that was like so interesting about, quick little side note about Bugsy Siegel. So when he was in LA, through his girlfriend, he met these people who like invented a new type of explosive, like sort of like dynamite, but it could be used in weapons. It was called atomite. And he goes, and they're like, we know the perfect guy to sell all this to, Benito Mussolini. Okay. So they take a trip over, and Mussolini's like, I'm not super interested. Go talk to this guy, Göring. So Hermann Göring was like one of Hitler's like right-hand men. Siegel's a Jew. Siegel fucking hates him, hates Göring, just from interacting with him, like across the table. And there's like, the story goes that Siegel was going to shoot Hermann Göring in 1941. Like one of like the world leaders, a horrible guy who was obviously a Nazi and was a convicted war criminal at Nuremberg. So he's like a bad guy, but it's like the whole history of the world, theoretically, because who knows like how that triggers Hitler and like what, butterfly effect of what happens. But Siegel, who's like a tough, mafia guy with, who knows, dozens of hits to his name. And he's doing a business deal, trying to do a business deal with this explosive. And he's like, I fucking hate this guy, Göring. I'm going to shoot him. So like, can you imagine but he had to be like restrained and then like talked out of killing Hermann Göring in a meeting in Italy. Banana story. And, but that was how he was. Like, he was known as like a guy who was like had a big mouth and a quick temper and didn't mind getting his hands dirty. But he was also, this visionary guy who was like, there's something about that desert air out there where they have these little dingy, shitty places. LA's booming. We can make this a destination if we just put, the right kind of vision and right kind of money into it. And he was right. And it's like he had this like, it's almost like you want to be able to be like, hey man, like get him a time machine and be like, this is what your idea became, and like take him to the Bellagio or take him to the Aria or something like that, or Cosmopolitan. It's crazy.
What a ballsy move though, because while it's not a super long drive, it's not exactly Chicago to Milwaukee.
Yeah, not back then even too. But
it was way worse back then, I'm sure. Yeah. So it's like,
very, very ballsy, but it's one of those things where it's like Palm Springs they don't have like the casino element, but it was like, let's get a place out of town. And I think that was, that people loved having their cars back then too. So it was before air travel. So you weren't going to be like, well, I live in LA, I'm going to vacation. Where are you going to vacation? Where are you going to go have a getaway weekend? It's 3 hours from you.
Yeah.
And so it was ballsy, but it was like the right guy at the right time and the right connections, both with Hollywood people to make it cool and with the mafia connections and the money to make it a reality. And then, but they say he just took too much and pissed people off to the point where it's like, we don't see that we're ever going to get our return on this the way that he had promised. And it's one thing to like lose money. It's another thing to be stolen from. And supposedly they're like, we think he's just like, a lot of that $6 million that just ended up in a Swiss bank account via his girlfriend. We can't have that. You better fucking whack him out.
I wonder if he was just mismanaging the fuck out of it.
They think that that's part of the deal too. So it was like they think there was a skim, they think there was some like just genuine stealing, and then there was definitely mismanagement, because I don't think it's an easy thing to open a hotel, casino, resort and manage that. You're managing construction, you're building a golf course, you're paying, signing contracts with like Jimmy Durante he has a great Christmas album. You would love it if you don't know this. Similar like Bing Crosby and Sinatra and those people. And so Jimmy Durante would like do shows there. So he like had the whole vision for Vegas, where it's going to be everything in once. You want to have leisure golf during the day? Great. You want to have fine dining at night, followed by a show, followed by gambling? We're going to put it all in one place called the Flamingo, and then build from there. And he just never got to build from there because they shot him in the head. And that story about the eye, like when he gets shot in the eye, so he didn't really get shot in the eye, but he got the force of being shot and the way that they hit him supposedly knocked his eye out of his head. And that's why in The Godfather they showed him getting shot through the eye, because there's something significant about the eye with Bugsy Siegel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, did you say, is it the original Flamingo? Like, is it?
Yeah.
So right now, like, so the same spot and everything?
It's the same spot. And so it was called the Flamingo. Then they reopened it as like the Fabulous Flamingo, but it's still operational. I just looked it up. So, but yeah, that was the original. It opened in 1947. So just to think like how far a city has come, where now it's 2 million people live there, something like that in that area.
Booming.
It's booming. Yeah. So, and it was just like, I think there's something to this Highway 91. Let's start putting shit there.
I gotta go check out this. What is it, like a plaque or something they have towards him?
Yeah, it almost looks like a Hall of Fame thing, where it's like a brass, big brass plaque with like a bust on the bottom of like what his face was, and they have like all this text down, and then they have like it's like on this. Man, it looks like it might be like a 6 foot tall slab of marble or something like that. I'm sure Harry can put it in the social clip for you, and but that's what it is. But and then there's also a restaurant called like Siegel 41.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. The guy fucking burning down food carts and shit and killing people. But like, I don't know, at the same time, like Vegas doesn't exist without this guy.
It definitely does not exist.
Yeah.
And it was, and like there's always, the mafia has always been a thing in this country for, I don't know, 100, back to the 1870s probably, maybe even before that. But and I'm probably wrong about this, but it doesn't feel like the mafia is now what it was even in the 90s. Like with the Gotti family, like who would be the prominent mafia family now? Can you think of one?
A prominent person in the mafia now?
Yeah, like remember, like in the 90s when I was a little kid, it was John Gotti. Oh, it was the Gotti family. Like they were still doing things. I feel like they're not celebrities like they used to be.
No, I mean it still exists for sure. Like there's even like Wikipedia's right now where it's like you could look up like Chicago mob or like New York mob, and it'll say like, oh, our presumed active boss and shit like that.
Do you think they're as big as they were in the 80s though? When they were like building these, they had these huge things with like the Teamster.
No,
it doesn't feel like it was like this big enterprise like it used to. Now I feel like,
but there's definitely still a presence.
I feel like it's more like cartels or like the organized crime.
Yeah,
now.
I could see that, but I could also see like, I mean, I don't know. I think it's just more legit.
Yeah, maybe.
It's more.
They've got like what Corleone always said. We're going to be completely legitimate in 5 years. That was always like.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just more legit. But I think people who initially started in these routes and were underground, I think it just. Yeah. They found ways to be like, hey, why are we?
Why are we running amok with the law? And, and all the violence and stuff. Yeah, but it doesn't seem like you don't read headlines. Oh, mafia boss gunned down. Like that doesn't.
Yeah, well, there was one gun down a year or two ago.
I don't remember
in Staten Island. Yeah.
Okay.
There was one gun down in Staten Island, and it turned out it was completely unrelated to mafia business. It was just a mentally ill kid who was like,
no way.
Yes, like he was like disturbed, and he for some reason I forgot what it was. I gotta look it up actually because it's so interesting.
Yeah, and like, do you know anybody who, like, you grew up with that is like, like he's doing this now and he's like a guy?
Not really. I mean, we talked about my grandpa Squeaks. He's in a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in a book for going to a one of the mob gambling places, like it was some factory in Melrose Park, and they followed and they tailed his license plate, and like his license plate is in the book and everything. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
He's in the Chicago Sun-Times, like with his getting arrested at a big crap table.
So my grandfather actually was in like a street gang too in South Boston, and he's in a book. It's called the South Side Gang. And when he was I was like a little kid, but he would always, and he had Alzheimer's. So like before he went into the nursing home, we'd go over and we would watch like the same John Wayne movie every time. And they'd be like, oh, I got to show you this book. Like I'm in this book. And I was like, 9 years old. And then he just went off, like then the war started and he went off the war, and then he came back and he just like never was like in it anymore.
Yeah.
That was it. That was yeah. He went to
interesting.
But it was like, if he didn't join the Navy he was like a fighter pilot. If he didn't do that, he probably stays in the neighborhood, and who knows? So
and that's interesting because the one I told my grandpa was in was called Pay, Quit, or Die, and it's I don't know, it's fascinating shit.
It's just a different time, like wildly different.
But like they definitely had run. That's why I really had runnings with Spilatro and all that stuff. But like that's why I always wondered if. I always want to get more information on him. Maybe we'll get, Nadu he's got the new sit down podcast.
I'm doing an episode with him next
week.
Are
you?
Yeah,
That's
we're
awesome.
going to talk about Johnny Rosselli. I think we're recording like October 3rd, so maybe right tonight when this comes out, maybe something like that. And excited to do it because that's a guy who's like very connected to the Kennedys, which I also love to talk about.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. But yeah, maybe we'll get Jeff on here, talk some Spilatro.
We should.
It'll be interesting.
A little crossover.
So here it is. There's a guy named Frank Cali in Staten Island. And in 2019, this kid who was obsessed with QAnon conspiracy theories believed Cali was a member of the deep state. And he was convinced he was enjoying the protection of Donald Trump himself. And so he tried to handcuff him and place him under citizen's arrest. And he ended up shooting him and killing him.
Damn.
Yeah.
So that is crazy. That was like we were thinking about things to do with Vegas, and the other one that I've never really looked into it, but I was like, oh, like what's some Las Vegas conspiracies? It was all about the shooting, and was it 17? They had the mass shooting.
Yeah.
And there's so many like great it's one of those things that, like I don't even really want to look into.
Yeah.
But there's a lot
of theories and whatnot.
Theories about that.
Yeah. Well, all right then. Thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the YouTube. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow. We will see you then.